start with the female reproduction. Okay, so we have the female reproductive system. And we can take a look at the anatomy of the female. Okay, very quickly, we can see the different structures. The ovaries are here, there's two, but this is only half the body being shown. You can see the ovary is attached by the oviduct or the fallopian tube, okay, or the uterine tube as it's called. It's got three names, and it attaches to the uterus. Okay, this is the neck of the uterus or the cervix, which opens into the vagina. Okay, here is the bladder. Here is the urethra, which is anterior to the vagina. Okay, the clitoris is located even further anterior. This is the pubic bone. We can see here the relationship of the anus to the vagina. Okay, and that gives you a basic idea of the anatomy. The finger-like projections up here are called the fimbria. Okay, and remember that the oviduct or fallopian tube or uterine tube are three names we can use for this structure here. Okay, these are the ovaries, the fimbria or the funnel-shaped opening to the oviduct, which goes then to the uterus, and there's two of these. Okay, you can see here better the fimbriae and the ovary. Okay, the fallopian tube. Okay, the female reproductive system. Both sexes have gonads, of course, ovaries or testes, where the gametes are produced. And both sexes have a system of ducts that house and conduct the gametes and the structures that facilitate copulation. The structure of the human female. The ovaries are almond-shaped. There's about an inch long, and they contain follicles, which are small round structures of different sizes. Each follicle contains a single egg cell. Okay, and it's surrounded by one or more layers of follicular cells that nourish and protect the developing cell. In addition to producing egg cells, the ovaries produce hormones. Okay, they produce the female sex hormone estrogen. Now, a woman is born with between 40,000 to 400,000 follicles, but only several hundred, about 400 to 500, will release egg cells during her reproductive years. Okay, so you have to understand that a woman was already born with all of the egg cells that she's ever going to have, and that number is between 40,000 to 400,000. But during the lifetime, from puberty to menopause, only about 400 to 500 eggs will be released. And starting at puberty and continuing until menopause, one follicle usually matures and releases its egg cell about every 28 days. An egg cell gets ejected from the follicle in the process called ovulation. Okay, after ovulation, the remaining follicular tissue grows within the ovary to form a solid mass called the corpus luteum. Corpus means body, luteum means yellow, so a yellow body forms. And you can see one in this figure, okay, the corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum secretes progesterone, which is a hormone that prepares the uterus to receive and nourish a fertilized egg. It causes, number one, the uterine lining to thicken. It causes the growth of many blood vessels into the lining. And if the egg is fertilized, it maintains the lining during pregnancy. Okay, so the ovaries then have these follicle cells which produce estrogen, and the corpus luteum which produces progesterone. And the progesterone we see prepares the uterine lining, it thickens it, it causes blood vessels to grow into the lining, and it maintains the lining if the egg becomes fertilized. Okay, So if the egg is not fertilized, the corpus luteum degenerates, and then a new follicle will mature during the next cycle. Each ovary lies next to the opening of an oviduct, okay, which is also called a fallopian tube or a uterine tube. The oviduct opening resembles a funnel with fringed finger-like projections, and the projections appear to touch the surface of the ovary, but the ovary is actually separated from the opening of the oviduct by a tiny space. When ovulation occurs, the egg passes across the space and into the oviduct, where there's cilia that help move it towards the uterus. If fertilization occurs, it occurs in the upper third of the oviduct. Okay? It occurs in the upper third of the oviduct. So fertilization occurs in the upper third of the oviduct. The resulting zygote then starts to divide, thus becoming an embryo as it moves along within the oviduct. The uterus, which is commonly called the womb, is the actual site of pregnancy. It is less than 4 inches long in a woman who has never been pregnant, but during pregnancy, the uterus can expand to accommodate a baby weighing about 4 kilograms or almost 9 pounds or more. The uterus is a thick muscular wall, and its inner lining is called the endometrium, is richly supplied with blood vessels, and the embryo implants by digesting a place for itself in this endometrium, and development is completed in this location. Now, the term embryo is used for the stage in development from the first division of the zygote until body structures begin to appear, which is about the 9th week in humans. From the 9th week until birth, the name changes and the developing human is referred to as a fetus. Okay, so here we can see the follicles maturing, and we can see the release of an egg in ovulation, and then the remaining tissue forms the corpus luteum. The ovary contains hundreds of eggs in various stages of development. As the follicle matures, the egg undergoes changes. At ovulation, the follicle bursts. The egg is released near the oviduct. The residual follicle is called a corpus luteum. This is not showing up, but it is a slide just telling you what progesterone is. I can read it. Prepares the uterus for fertilized egg, thickens the uterine lining, promotes the growth of many blood vessels into the lining. Therefore, it maintains the uterine lining during pregnancy. I don't know what's wrong with that slide. And these are the 3 names: uterine tube, oviduct, and fallopian tube. These are the finger-like projections, the fimbriae, okay, of the fallopian tube. You can see that here. You can see the thick endometrium, also the myometrium, and the perimetrium. Okay, fertilization is occurring. Notice it occurs in the upper third of the oviduct. Okay, then the zygote forms and it starts going towards the uterus. Okay, it starts traveling downwards. And then it implants. This shows you fertilization and implantation. Okay, again, we can see this: fertilization and implantation. Now, the uterus is the normal site of pregnancy. However, in about 1 out of 100 pregnancies, the embryo implants somewhere else, resulting in an ectopic pregnancy. Ectopic means out of place. Most ectopic pregnancies occur in the oviduct, and they're called tubal pregnancies. Ectopic pregnancies require surgical removal, otherwise they can rupture the surrounding tissues, causing severe bleeding and even death. Showing you the uterus, the cervix, ovaries, the fimbriae. Okay, again, the uterus. This is looking at a cross section. So we're looking down at the uterus, okay? And this would be the bladder. This is showing you a cesarean section. So this is the uterus, and here's the ovaries, okay? Baby's inside of this. Okay, this shows you the implantation. And this is reinforcing the terminology. Embryo is from the zygote, okay, as soon as we have the fusion of the egg and the sperm from the first division up until the appearance of body structures, which is about the 9th week. And then we use the term fetus from the 9th week until birth. So zygote, embryo, fetus. This is showing you an ectopic pregnancy. Okay, implantation where it's not supposed to happen is occurring in the oviduct. Okay, as we said, most of the ectopic pregnancies are tubal pregnancies. Okay, the neck of the uterus is called the cervix, and it opens into the vagina. The vagina is a thin walled but strong muscular chamber that, number one, serves as the birth canal through which the baby is expelled. And the vagina also accommodates the male penis and is the repository for sperm during copulation. Notice that the vagina opens to the outside just behind the opening of the urethra, and that there is a pair of skin folds, the labia minora, which border the opening of the vagina. And then there is the thick fatty ridges, or the labia majora, which protect the entire genital region. Until sexual intercourse or vigorous physical activity, there's going to be a thin membrane called the hymen that partially covers the vaginal opening. Okay, the hymen has no known function. This is just showing you the cervix, okay, the normal cervix. Okay, this is the normal looking cervix. There's the vagina. Okay, here are the internal folds, the labia minora, and then the fatty ridges, the external folds, the labia majora, which protect the entire genital region. Okay. The whole area is called veneris mons, mons veneris. Okay, the vagina again with the labia minora. There's the clitoris with the little hood. Okay, and there you can see the hymen. Okay, so the vagina again opens to the outside just behind the opening of the urethra. Okay, and the skin folds, the labia minora, the labia majora, and the hymen is this thin membrane that usually ruptures during the first intercourse or otherwise during vigorous physical activity. There are also at the vaginal opening, there are some glands, the Bartholin's glands, and these are near the vaginal opening and may secrete a lubricating fluid during sexual arousal, as does the entire vaginal lining. You can see Bartholin's glands in another picture. Okay, they're right over here, okay. Bartholin's glands, where are they? Bartholin's glands right here, okay. Here you can see the 3 openings, the external urethral orifice, okay, then the vaginal opening, and then the anus, okay. And then up here we have the clitoris. Clitoris is up here, okay. Okay, so Bartholin's glands are near the opening and they secrete a lubricating fluid during arousal, okay, and several female reproductive structures are important in sexual arousal, and they, the vagina, the labia minora, and the clitoris all engorge with blood and enlarge during sexual activity. The sole function of the clitoris is for sexual arousal, and it consists of a short shaft supporting a rounded glans or head that's covered by a small hood of skin called the prepuce. Okay, so it's like a tiny little penis. Okay, you can see that there's a little head, okay, and a short shaft that we don't see, and then there's a little hood over it called the prepuce. Okay, so think of it as a little tiny, small miniature penis. The glans has an enormous number of nerve endings and is very sensitive to touch. Some cultures remove the clitoris because they feel that
it's 3 o'clock.
They feel that there's no function to it So why should females have that? It's a little barbaric, and lots of women rights groups are trying to abolish that. FSH is the hormone that's produced in the anterior pituitary gland to stimulate the follicle to develop. It's called follicle stimulating hormone. And LH, or luteinizing hormone, is the hormone that causes ovulation and the formulation of the corpus luteum. So we want to look at the formation of the ovum, the egg, which is called oogenesis. The development of an ovum occurs in the ovary, and we said that at a female's ovary at birth contains all the follicles or ovum-forming bodies that she'll ever have. At birth, each follicle contains a dormant primary oocyte that is sort of in a resting phase of meiosis 1. And then after puberty, which is about 12 to 14 years of age, to about 50 years of age, every 28 days, FSH, or follicle-stimulating hormone, from the pituitary gland stimulates one of the dormant follicles to develop, and then later an egg is going to be released due to LH, or luteinizing hormone. So again, these hormones are very important. Okay, and you see FSH and LH, a little summary of them here. FSH is going to be follicle-stimulating hormone. It stimulates the follicle to develop. LH is luteinizing hormone, which triggers ovulation, that is the release of the egg, and then the formation of the corpus luteum. Okay, so the female is born with all the follicles that she will ever contain, that she will ever have, and then the follicle contains a dormant oocyte, which is a resting cell. This picture is showing us the urethral opening. Okay, it shows us the clitoris, it shows us the vaginal opening, and it shows us Bartholin's gland also. Okay, so the ovarian cycle are the cyclic events that occur in the ovary every 28 days. The menstrual cycle are the cyclic events that occur in the uterus. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment, but we'll take a short break at this point.